The light was soft but precise, the kind of light that belongs in photographs, not politics. Outside the Capitol, tourists snapped selfies, and school buses unloaded students with wide eyes and permission slips. Inside, it was just another Tuesday, or so it seemed. The House Committee on National Security had a full scheduled testimony from minor agencies. 3 items marked routine. One name listed toward the bottom rep: Jasmine Crockett. Most staffers didn't even glance at it. To them, it was just another morning of staged debates and partisan theater, just noise in a city built on scripted conflict. But not for Jasmine. She stepped into room C210 exactly 30 minutes before anyone else. Not because she needed to rehearse, but because she wanted to feel the space. There is something about silence that tells the truth. And in that silence, she could map every camera angle, every exit, every potential eye that might try to look away from what she was about to reveal. She wore navy sharp tailored and without a single wrinkle. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor. Her face was unreadable, not because she was cold, but because she had done this before. She had stared down judges who dismissed her. She had defended clients with no money, no power, no voice. And today she would do the same, only now the client was truth itself. In her right hand she carried a briefcase. But it wasn't the case that mattered. It was what she laid on the table. A crimson folder, thin but heavy, like it carried the weight of a nation's blind spot. It didn't draw attention. It didn't need to, because power doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. She aligned the folder exactly in the center of her seat, down to the millimeter. That wasn't for theatrics. That was discipline, a trial lawyer's instinct, a tactician's habit. Meanwhile, around her, the room began to fill. Congressional aides walked in chatting about last night's cable news drama. A junior reporter asked someone where the coffee was. 2 senators checked their phones for polling updates. No one noticed the bomb on the table. Not yet. They didn't know that inside that folder were documents 2 years in the making, Moabitans gathered across 3 countries, verified by forensic analysts, and kept quiet through months of delicate coordination. They didn't know they were minutes away from a moment that would redefine recent American history. They didn't know that Jasmine Crockett wasn't here to testify. She was here to expose. And the folder's silent-centered crimson was about to speak for her. Congressman Robert Steinberg adjusted his crimson tie in the reflection of his phone, not because it was crooked, but because it was habit, a signal, a ritual. One last touch of control before he stepped onto his favorite stage, Capitol Hill. He was 62 years old and had spent nearly half his life in politics. And by now he believed he'd seen everything: whistleblowers, gotcha journalists, emotional activists, all of them loud, all of them temporary. But he wasn't worried about today. To him, today was just another Tuesday, just another hearing where he'd dominate the headlines, mock the opposition, and remind the country why his voice still carried weight. He didn't even read the full witness list. He didn't need to. When his aide whispered, "Congresswoman Crockett's up next," Steinberg simply chuckled. "That TikTok Congresswoman, please. I'll be out of here before lunch." The arrogance wasn't an act. It was muscle memory. This was the same man who once filibustered for 6 hours just to block a bill that would be protected whistleblowers. He didn't survive 3 decades in Washington by underestimating his own power. But today he made a mistake. He underestimated hers. The reporters barely looked up as he walked in. Most of them were scrolling, tweeting, sipping burnt coffee from paper cups. Staffers whispered about weekend plans. Laughter echoed from one corner as a junior assistant tripped over a microphone cord. The room looked like any other hearing, but beneath it all, just out of reach, a storm was forming. And the man who thought he was untouchable was already standing in its eye. The room fell silent. No gavel, no shout, no argument. Just a soft rustle of paper. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any accusation. She reached into a simple folder and pulled out 2 documents. Both bore the same hospital logo, same date, same city, 3 minutes apart. She laid them side by side on the witness table, slowly, deliberately, as if she was placing evidence before a jury. "These are birth certificates," she said calmly, "issued by the same hospital. Same delivery room, same doctor's signature, same attending nurse, but for 2 different newborns. One read Donald John Trump, the other read David Marcus Fisher." The camera zoomed in. Phones buzzed. A gasp came from somewhere in the gallery. Jasmine looked directly at Congressman Steinberg. The man we know as Donald Trump may not be who he says he is. You could almost hear a heartbeat in the pause that followed. Steinberg blinked once, then twice. His smirk faltered. "Ma'am, what exactly are you implying?" he barked, trying to grab control. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She pointed to the timestamps, one birth at 10:42 a.m., the other at 10:45, same mother's initials, but different last names. Steinberg's face flushed. "This is nonsense. Conspiracy theory garbage." Jasmine smiled, not out of spite, but precision. "If it's garbage, Congressman, why does this next page show a sealed court adoption order signed in 1973 bearing Trump's signature at the age of 27? The courtroom exploded in whispers. But Jasmine. She remained still unmoved, because she knew the first domino had just fallen. The courtroom didn't breathe. Not a cough, not a whisper. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice steady yet softer now, like she was uncovering a wound that had never healed. Everyone kept asking why she looked different. The eyes, the jawline, the way she held her hands. They said it was cosmetic surgery, lighting, stress. But the answer was much simpler. She turned the page. Up came a school photo, two girls identical in every way, except one had a tiny scar on her right temple. Jasmine pointed. "This is Melania, and this her identical twin, Mariana." Gasps echoed through the room. Born in Slovenia, same day, same hospital, one stayed with the family. The other vanished from public records by the time she was 8. She flipped to a Slovenian missing person report, long faded and yellowing. Reported missing in 1988. Case closed in 1994. Official cause presumed dead. A chill swept through the room. But she wasn't dead, Jasmine continued. She was hidden, groomed, and when the time came, she was chosen to be First Lady. There was no screaming, no one stormed out, but the silence was deafening. People weren't just shocked, they were horrified. Not because it was outrageous, but because it made sense. The Melania who swatted Trump's hand, the one who vanished for months at a time, the one who didn't seem to recognize her own parents at public events. Maybe that wasn't Melania at all. She wasn't a look-alike, Jasmine whispered. She was her sister. The room had barely recovered from the revelation of the twin when Jasmine Crockett took a slow, deliberate step forward. Without a word, she tapped her finger twice on the screen behind her. The lights dimmed. Two photographs appeared side by side on the monitors above the hearing room. On the left, a high-resolution image of Melania Trump seated at a luxury gala in Palm Beach, Florida, champagne glass in hand, surrounded by U.S. donors and European dignitaries. The timestamp March 14th, 9:48 p.m. East ODA. On the right, another photo Grenier, clearly taken in secret. The same face. But the location was unmistakably Moscow, a shadowy meeting room. The woman leaned in close to a man with a sharp widow's peak, a Kremlin intelligence advisor now confirmed. The timestamp March 15th, 4 a.m. Moscow time, just 12 hours apart. A ripple passed through the chamber. Eyes widened, hands flew to mouths. Someone whispered, "That's impossible." Jasmine's voice cut through the silence. One woman, two continents, 12 hours apart. Which one was the First Lady, or were neither of them? The lie wasn't a theory anymore. It had a face, two faces. Jasmine didn't flinch. The room was already reeling, but she wasn't done. "Some of you may say this is just a look-alike, a doctored image, a smear job." She tapped the screen again. The grainy photo from Moscow was replaced this time by high-definition footage. The silence shattered. A collective inhale swept through the room like a sudden gust of wind. There she was, Melania Trump, or the woman everyone believed to be Melania, standing beside Vladimir Putin. Not in the background, not across the table. Beside him, arm in arm, wearing a pale silver dress, her hair pinned up in a style she'd never worn publicly. She wasn't his guest. She was introduced as the First Lady of the Russian Federation. Reporters dropped their pens. A cameraman cursed under his breath. One senator stood up and sat right back down, pale. "This video is authenticated," Jasmine continued. "Taken during a closed-door Kremlin banquet 2 weeks before the U.S. midterm elections." Then she added chillingly, "It was not leaked by a journalist. It was sent anonymously." No one in that room would ever sleep the same again. Out came a transparent evidence sleeve inside hair strands, meticulously sealed and dated. The labels read, Trump Tower 2014, Andrews Air Force Base 2018, a New York hotel pillowcase. 2020 Moscow banquet recovered from a hairbrush. 22, each item was numbered, logged, and notarized. Over the last decade, independent investigators in Switzerland, Canada, and Japan analyzed these samples. A new slide flashed 3 DNA lab reports, 3 languages. One result, genetically identical, not similar, not cousins, not clones, identical, twins. The room dropped into silence like it had fallen off a cliff. Senators glanced at each other. One of them mouthed the word, twins. Jasmine nodded slowly. The chain of custody is clear. The samples never left secure handling. The findings were triple-blinded. There was no room for error. For the first time, the conspiracy wasn't just whispered, it stood in the open, undeniable, with science holding the smoking gun. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The truth had already begun tearing the walls down. There is no conspiracy theory. There is no CGI, no deep fake, no political stunt. She clicked the remote. On the screen behind her, a new headline from Nature Genetics mirrored twin DNA confirmed across 3 nations, followed by another from the Lancet Public Deception enabled by hidden genetic match. Then a government document previously classified marked with the Pentagon seal. This isn't fringe science, these are peer-reviewed findings. Military-adjacent intelligence flagged the anomaly in 2021 and buried it. The audience shifted. You could feel the heat of betrayal rising. The genetic sequences were tested on 23 markers, all identical, not 99%, not close enough. Exact, she paused. They knew. One word, heavy, they knew, and they did nothing. For 12 years, the system protected the illusion. The media played along, so did foreign allies. We were watching a lie in high definition. Anger flared in the crowd, on the live stream chat, in every home. The truth wasn't whispered anymore, it was shouted in PDFs, data, and DNA. And it was undeniable. The screen went black for 2 seconds, then a scanned document faded in. The seal of the Russian Federation gleamed in the top left. Marriage certificate number 1378, St. Petersburg Civil Office. Jasmine stood still, eyes scanning the crowd. Then she spoke. This was filed on August 9, 1999, exactly 1 week before Vladimir Putin became Prime Minister of Russia. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The bride's name, Melania Knaus, German-born, Slovenian descent. No known family. She let the silence stretch. This isn't Melania. This is her twin. Another click. A grainy photo appeared, 2 people exiting a cathedral in the snow. One man unmistakably Putin. The woman beside him identical to the First Lady. Except for her eyes. Notice the posture, the chin, but more importantly, the wedding band. The room began to spin. This was buried in a regional archive, never digitized, never translated. Until now, what started as whispers of disbelief became waves of dread. This wasn't just a personal secret. This rewired the geopolitical timeline. Because if Putin had married the hidden twin, what else had been arranged? Jasmine's voice dropped to a whisper, the kind that silences entire rooms. For 25 years, America embraced a stranger. She stood beside 2 presidents. She dined with global leaders, spoke at UN summits, cut ribbons at children's hospitals. The screen behind her lit up with a fast sequence of photographs, Melania or Melena shaking hands with Angela Merkel, laughing beside Queen Elizabeth II, hugging Michelle Obama, walking through the Rose Garden, alone, and in every frame the same eyes. But now those eyes told a different story. Not once, not a single federal agency verified her DNA. Not once did the White House run a biometric trace. The silence was suffocating. She wasn't just a first lady. She was a first asset. Gasps broke out. Someone yelled, "What the hell?" Because now it was personal. This wasn't political anymore. This was infiltration. Right into the heart of American power. How many security briefings did she overhear? How many rooms was she never supposed to be in? And how long before Putin used her congressman, Robert Steinberg, slammed his palm on the table? This is a circus, Ms. Crockett. You have no right. Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't move. She just let silence hang. The room tensed, cameras zoomed in. Everyone held their breath. And then with the force of 1,000 quiet truths, she spoke. Congressman Steinberg, were you aware of the 2016 executive order requiring biometric scans for all foreign nationals entering the White House? He opened his mouth, closed it, because your name is on the waiver. A collective gasp. You signed off on the exemption. That let her walk in unchecked. His face drained of color. You didn't just allow it, you facilitated it. He shook his head at stammering. That's not, I didn't. Shall I read the emails? She tapped her tablet. One click, the screen behind her filled with documents. Subject line special accommodations for diplomatic spouse. Clearance override approved. Now it wasn't just silence. It was freefall. Steinberg collapsed into his seat, his power drained live on national television. Jasmine didn't smile. She just said your complicity wasn't a mistake. It was policy. The room was still too still. Steinberg sat frozen eyes, glassy sweat crawling down his temple like guilt liquefied. His lips moved, but no sound came out. The once smirking congressman, now a shell of cowardice in a tailored suit. And Jasmine, she stood tall. Not furious, not smug, just undeniably right. She looked directly into the cameras, not at Congress but at America. Loyalty without truth, she said, her voice clear, isn't patriotism. Gasps, phones shot up, flashes ignited, and just like that, history tilted. Hashtags trended, feeds flooded. Within seconds, the words appeared in every language. Loyalty without truth isn't patriotism. La loyauté sans frites n'est pas du patriotisme. It was more than a statement. It was a scalpel slicing through years of denial. Steinberg couldn't look up. He didn't need to. The world was already watching. And Jasmine, she became a folk hero in real time. The room that once judged her, now feared her. The moment Jasmine's words ended, the world didn't just react, it convulsed. Within 30 minutes, NATO called an emergency midnight summit. Generals didn't sleep. Diplomats whispered phrases like Article 5 breach and infiltration at the highest level. The CIA, once smug in their own vetting process, scrambled. Every background check from the past 25 years was reopened. All eyes turned inward, and the question burned through every hallway in Langley. What else did we miss? Meanwhile, Moscow went silent. No statements, no denials, just a sudden media blackout and one eerie fact: Putin hadn't been seen publicly in 72 hours. Every major network, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, NHK, ran wall-to-wall coverage. First Lady or First Lie blared across headlines. Old White House photos were dissected frame by frame. Online sleuths pointed out blink rates, left-handed coffee habits, mirrored beauty marks. America was reeling, but the world was terrified. What if this wasn't just a scandal? What if it was a 25-year operation that succeeded as the hearings ended, as headlines screamed and phones across Capitol Hill lit up? One question rose above the chaos. Not from the media, not from the officials, but from the millions watching, hands, trembling hearts racing. What if Jasmine Crockett hadn't spoken? How long would we have lived the lie? The camera pulls in slowly past the stunned faces, the silenced politicians, the ripped flags of false loyalty, and lands on Jasmine. She stands alone, not triumphant, not bitter, just honest. And then looking straight into the camera, into America, she says, truth isn't comfortable. But comfort never protected democracy. It hits like a lightning bolt. No music, no applause, just silence. The kind that follows after something inside you changes forever. And in that silence, something else awakens, not fear, not doubt, but a flicker of resolve. From college dorm rooms to factory break rooms, from churches to war rooms, people were no longer just watching history. They were part of it. Truth doesn't come to comfort you. It comes to wake you up. Jasmine Crockett's story isn't just about exposing a secret or humiliating a politician. It's about how one woman's courage to speak truth to power ignited a fire across nations. In a world flooded with lies, manipulation, and billion-dollar PR machines, truth has become the most radical act of all. And sometimes it only takes one person brave enough to ask the question. One person who doesn't sit down, one person who won't be silenced. The real lesson: never underestimate the power of your voice. Because if you don't speak the truth, who will? If this story shook you, if it made you think, made you angry, or made you hungry for truth, then don't let it stop here. Subscribe. Because here we don't just tell stories to entertain. We tell stories to wake people up. Join a community of truth seekers, of challengers, of people who refuse to look away. Because the world doesn't need more silence. It needs more voices like Jasmine Crockett's. Click subscribe and never let truth be silenced again.